Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Crew. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other host. We've got some great articles today about drones you could ride, about NASA talking about AAM and any barriers that might actually stop it from getting public acceptance. We're going to be talking about the Fortnite Apple lawsuit. It's progressing, but sort of not. And then finally, we're going to be talking about H&M using electric vehicles for last mile delivery. So we've got some great guests here today to talk about these issues. Jamar Williams, who just dropped out again. Hopefully he'll pop back in. And then we also have Jack over here. So Jamar, did we still got audio?
Yeah, I'm here if you can hear me.
All
We can
right.
hear you.
Tell
Okay,
us a little
sorry
bit
about
about
that.
yourself.
Yeah, we're having technical difficulties. I'll work on that, but thanks for that. I'm Jamar Williams, CEO and founder of PromoDrone. I promise I don't look like a little circle with just letters in it. Um, Started this company with the great idea of can you put information on a drone in a different way in an era of clandestine operations where we're trying to bridge the gap between public sentiment and our technology. Technology like ours, we believe, are kind of that centerpiece that allows people to use drones in these innovative ways. So take a screen, a digital screen, mount it to a drone, use it from anything from emergency services to advertising as a way to bring people and messages closer together in a more succinct way. So that's what we do, and we're excited for a bunch of new announcements we're about to make. Huge for the trajectory of our company. So just thanks for having us on, and greatly appreciate the time that you're giving to us today.
Yeah, great to have you again. And then we got Jack Withinshaw. So Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for having me. I'm Jack Withinshaw, Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder here at Airspeeder. Airspeeder effectively is Formula One of the Skies. It's a flying premium eVTOL racing series designed to drive and accelerate the technological speed of the UAM world. We believe that nothing drives innovation like competition, and just like the automotive industry over 100 years ago, racing was one of the first applications that really drove and kickstarted a whole new mobility revolution. And we're doing it for this mobility revolution through racing in both crewed and uncrewed series to be able to build a whole new flying car ecosystem. So yeah, welcome to, really excited to be here and join the chat.
Yeah, as somebody who watches Formula One every weekend, and we just saw the World Championship, the last race in Abu Dhabi yesterday, I totally understand the history of how basically racing pushed the engineering forward. So really excited to meet you, really excited to have you on. And I think actually you're kind of the perfect foil or I guess counterpoint to Jamar's article. So you could provide more details. So Jamar, tell us a little bit about why you picked this article. Drones are turning into personal flying machines.
Yeah, so before I begin, I'll set the stage, right? So let's go back to like summer of 1985, summer of 1986, right? School's out. You were tasked with keeping ourselves busy throughout the day. We've got wrestling belts made out of cardboard with aluminum foil and shoestrings, on them, shoelaces, and we're all like champions of the block. And then we all race home because the show called G.I. Joe's about to come on, right? Like, if like I was a fan of these, the all-American hero G.I. Joe. And what made G.I. Joe so cool, not only what they represented, right, like standing for justice and all these cool things, and they would have like this word of inspiration at the end, knowing is half the battle with this message, but they had the coolest technology in the world, right? They had these devices that could fly, they could shoot all types of futuristic phasers, and I was just blown away by like the aircraft that they would use, like Cobra, GI Joe, whether they were like backpacks or like just whatever propulsion, sonic propulsion they were using to get around. I thought that was awesome. So fast forward to 2022, and here I am in this world of flying things where we've got these devices that people can stand on and fly, and they can sit in and fly, and they can be used for emergency and all these cool things. So I came across this article about how these drones, which kind of paved the way for a lot of this stuff, right? Like that the initial regulatory pathways, the initial hurdles that we were having with drones are kind of, the crawl so that the rest of these kind of personal aviation vehicles can run. So like now it's like G.I. Joe's becoming real to me now in a whole different kind of way. So it's like my childhood fascinations inspired by this stuff, in addition to all the cool things that can happen and how it affects the world. So this article talks about how early concepts of how we would envision humans flying in the air started with things like jetpacks, right? Like The Rocketeer was like one of my favorite movies as a kid, the way this guy flying through the air. But like nobody thought about like, why is this guy's legs not getting burned up? Or like how are they like, how are they keeping this thing from like blowing up in the sky, right? So like I think of like these early like German films from military, and you see these poor souls and these strapping these combustible engines on their backs, and they just like, I'm like, that was our vision of what we thought flying humans would be in the future. Now we're able to take that concept, put rotors on a platform, right, and like fly around with your friends. So when I think about all this work we're doing, all the good work we're doing with advancing the industry, sometimes we get really fixated on these big global challenges, and sometimes we forget that like there's just a fun element to just being in the air, feeling like a bird in the sky. And when I saw this article, I was really my eyes opened up a lot more to that kind of the smaller vehicles. These vehicles that don't necessarily have to go through all the regulations, and they're used in purely recreational ways because of their size, their weight. They're kind of in a certain weight class that allows that. And so I start thinking of all the cool ways that my GI Joe fantasies can come true. Like I can't wait to buy one of these vehicles, right? And one of the companies I was looking at, they're ironically enough called the Jetson One aircraft, and you can sit in this thing, fly around for 20 minutes at low altitudes, in non-populated areas. So if you've got your own land, a farm or some land somewhere, you can technically fly these things around. It seems like for the fun of it on the weekend with you and your buddies, as long as you keep it kind of contained and controlled to what you're doing. So I'm just excited that we've gone from like this platform Jetsons in the air thing to now we're talking about vertiports, and we look at like these aquatic things that give us the same kind of feeling where you strap these like jet things to your arms and it sucks the water up and you can fly around in the water, like kind of deal, like one of those little, and it's just feeling of freedom when you're in the air. So I think it's just really cool that we've gotten to a place where those things that used to be fantasy, that used to be part of our imagination, is kind of reality's catching up with that. And obviously regulatory, when I'm watching GI Joe, I didn't think about like what they had to go through to get approval for these jet craft to fly and
in
do their
controlled
things.
airspace. They could do what they
Yeah,
want.
exactly, right.
Yeah, exactly. They're military, dude. They're military.
Yeah, blowing up everything, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'll just be up there. So it's pretty cool that as much as we are, really pushing regulatory, there is kind of this other market where I didn't quite realize was such, I kind of fundamentally forgotten about it a little bit. So this kind of retapped into my childhood, kind of had a little personal connection to the reality that this is closer than we thought before, and it was awesome. I just thought it was a fascinating kind of kickback, kind of retrofitting of our concept of what the future would look like. So
Yeah, what's new is old again. So what do you think, Jack?
I couldn't agree more. I think Jamar's absolutely on the money. This is the future that we all wanted. We all dreamed about personal air mobility, and I've got a lot of love for the UAM and the flying taxis out there, but did we really dream about sharing a sky bus with a lot of other people? And that wasn't the vision we grew up on, was it? George Jetson doesn't catch a sky bus to work. He has his own airport, his own transport vehicle that folds down to a suitcase, and then he hops into work. That was the vision that we all fell in love with. And this brings me to my article, I think, in a lot of ways, this is a vision that we've always had since kids growing up, and we've wanted. Flying cars are finally becoming a reality, and nobody knows about it. That
Yeah,
is painful.
we're totally gonna. Well, it's true. It's true, Jack. We're going to get to your article in a second, but I want to back up and kind of fill in some gaps here. So this Jetson company, Swedish, by the way, built by a .com millionaire, Peter Turnstrom, who saw like Jamar, not G.I. Joe, but Star Wars and those, speeders that were in Star Wars, and had this vision of, oh, that would be cool to do someday. And actually started making those. And what intrigued me about this article, and I love actually both of your thoughts and Mike's, of course, there's a quote in here from Chris Anderson, who was maybe still is, not sure, Kitty Hawk. I'm not sure what's happening with Kitty Hawk. But anyway, it's COO of the eVTOL. Yeah, Kitty Hawk's out.
There was a bigger company, though, that was also part of their funding or something like that. I don't know the full details yet, but it was basically they pulled engineers away to the project that could fit more people. rather than a single person transport.
Yeah, so they pulled out of the eVTOL market, I know that, but the quote is from this guy, Chris Anderson from there, and he says, they're just big drones. And I'll tell you, I was just at Archer's big reveal last week for their Midnight aircraft, and I feel like if and now there's going to be a pilot in that thing with 4 passengers. Eventually, someday, as this article alludes to, there's going to be, fully autonomous flight. But I think they would cringe if you called like their vehicle a drone. And, we're using all of these words. It does get to your article, which we're going to get to here soon, Jack, but this idea of words matter, right? Like how can the public even know what they are if we call them all different things, everything from flying taxis to flying cars to drone cars, which is mentioned in this article. It makes my head explode. And eVTOL, no one knows what that means in the public for sure.
This is one of my favorite arguments of all time, is around taxonomy. Like, how do we correctly label this industry? And we love acronyms, and I think eVTOL is probably one of the least sexy acronyms we've ever
Totally agree.
Yet we're rallying behind it. And we're rejecting names like flying cars because they don't have 4 wheels. But car is really just a shortage of carriage, which means horseless carriage, which it also doesn't have a horse. So why are we not going on about that as well? The point is, flying cars has the right feeling and sentiment of what we're trying to create here, I believe. eVTOLs, yes, technically correct, but so hard for a 12-year-old to get inspired by that kind of terminology.
Yeah.
So I think we're at this kind of crux where we need to kind of start figuring out what the right words are. And I'm a history buff. I always go back in time and think about things like horseless carriage or quadricycle, which were the 2 front runners for the car initially. They're crap terms, but we've got to find good ones that we all kind of get behind and we all think are great. So yeah, I agree. I think if you call them big flying drones, it's not accurate. It's also, I do cringe when people call our Airspeeders big drones. Although it's actually accurate, it's still not evocative of the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Right. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of like what Jack is saying there about how the terms will evolve and settle on the thing that actually works and describes it, and almost it's almost a sign that the industry is very young, that the acronyms are still reigning, because that means we haven't worked out all the regulatory stuff yet. It means, no offense to my friends who do this stuff, it means the boring people are in charge of it. We haven't gotten to the marketing phase yet. We tried to, and then had realized we hadn't worked out a lot of the engineering, hadn't worked out the regulatory hurdles. So now we're in that kind of that space, and once that's over, you're going to see, I think, the term kind of come to settle. What, John?
2 quick comments. One is Flight Crowd took a stab at creating like an urban air mobility kind of glossary. So check that out, Jack. I don't know if you looked at that, but for everybody's information. And the second thing, to tag on what you said, Mike, about regulations and not being sorted. So the ones that apply to the vehicles they're talking about in this article are the ultralight regulations, which fall under Part 103 for those that didn't know. I'm not going to get into all of it. I encourage you guys to look it up, because probably most people in the drone world, they know Part 107, general aviation, they know all the other parts, right? Part 91, Part 23, Part 135, all of these things. But 103 covers ultralights, and it's really interesting once you start peeling it back. But the bottom line for it, ultralights and that regulation is they have to be used exclusively for sport or recreational purposes. There's weight limits, all kinds of things, maximum speeds, etc. So really, really interesting once these things start maybe flying around neighborhoods, because what they said was, at least with Jetson, there's 320 pre-orders, and they expect to be delivering these by the end of 2023, which is next year, to mostly, quote, high-profile people from California. They mentioned Zuckerberg, but they said like him, but we can't say it's him.
Yeah, all right. That's not a full market though, so we'll see. There's only so many of those people you could sell into, and usually they're not as interested as you think they are. But yeah, for what I thought was really interesting, and thanks to Jamar for bringing this up. It kind of did re-inspire me to what was cool about this, that got me interested in this stuff in the first place, and knowing that there's actually a zone for expansion that's a little bit more settled in terms of regulation, or at least has space to move around, let's say,
No pun.
is kind of inspiring. No pun intended. Totally.
You know what I envision, just real quick? So when I think of like the rally cars, I think about these big dirt tracks that have, you know, ramps and all of that. Like eventually, you know, I see these kind of similar to these ultra lightweights. You could do something very similar to that. Obviously, there's a lot to figure out there with collision and all of that stuff, but you know, it's pretty interesting what this could look like. So I'm excited. I'm super excited.
You'd be surprised what's already capable with the current engineering that just isn't implemented because of understanding of how these devices will, work in a regulatory in the regulated airspace. So if you're not in regulated airspace, you could see things basically act like UFOs at this point
Yeah.
in history. I remember the first time I went to the Otarian offices in Switzerland, and Wingters in the same building at the time, and we went out to the field, and I saw this thing that was basically just a rotor flipping itself, turning upside down, uh, and now we have versions of that are actually, uh, what do they call that system? But anyway, basically, it doesn't matter. It's basically like a floating mouse pointer. So if you have that level of control, just a little refinement to the task, and you'd be surprised how quick this technology will evolve. So hopefully, the market will be opening up for that. Um, so actually, let's talk about public acceptance, because that's a big hurdle to get over. So Jack, tell us about NASA's assessment here and what it means for.
Yeah, cool. So this article jumped out at me just a couple of weeks ago, because I am, I think, at this stage 100% Kool-Aid. I love AAM, I love UAM. This is me till I die. But when I heard that 75% of people had not heard about flying cars, I kind of just realized that we are in a bubble. We're in our own little bubble here, and we need to step out of it for this industry to really succeed. And there's five of those big barriers, maybe six of the big barriers that we need as an industry to overcome for flying taxis to exist in cities: certification, regulation, noise. We need the infrastructure to be there as well. Batteries aren't quite there yet, but they're getting there. And the last one is public acceptance. And it feels to me as though this is the final piece of the puzzle that they want to bring in, but hasn't been focused on initially. And I find that kind of baffling that we haven't brought the public in earlier as the biggest stakeholder of this industry, not only to allow this to happen, but for them to want this to happen, for us to have customers, to have adoption, so that we can have flying cars as part of our everyday society. And so I think it was a bit of a wake-up call, and I kind of using the podium that is full crew to talk about it, to say, guys, we need to really address this, and probably in 2023. I get that certification's on a path and it's continually changing, and regulations can be doing the same. But this is one that we can start affecting now. How do we get people to fall in love with it? So that's probably one of the big comments I want to kind of just raise here today, is some ideas. And I'm absolutely amazed by Jamar's article to be able to bring in personal air mobility vehicles, because that's what we're big believers in at Airspeeder. They're not only one of the earlier markets that you can actually not so reliant on those big 6 hurdles of being completed, but it's a great way to inspire, a great way to fall in love again with what we always thought flying cars could be. So we at Airspeeder, we're big fans of obviously racing. We know racing was one of the first applications in the automotive world. It's the first application in aviation with things like the Schneider Trophy. And so we're here to be able to say that for flying cars, we think it's probably one of the first applications. And so whether you look at the recreational hobby vehicles like Jetson, or if you look at the motorsport vehicles that we're creating with Airspeeder, they're there to be able to say to a next generation, not only is this technology ready today, and we're already racing in crazy environments, which is brilliant, but the acceptance of it, the acceptance of it is reliant on the awareness. And for awareness, we need to get that far and wide. We need young, old, guys, girls, everyone to be thinking about flying cars and how they can embrace in their day-to-day, whether it's your personal air mobility or whether it's you're watching on TV as the Formula One in the skies, whatever it is. And so, for me, it's just raising a bit of awareness on how we get that 75% figure lower, how we get 100% of people knowing about flying cars. And and so open to the thoughts on the table.
I think Jamar's up next.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I think that definitely we have to get kind of the linguistics figured out, because like, and our challenge is when we explain it, when we were using the term flying cars, people envision like they're driving, you know, on the 805 and then their car sprouts wings and takes off and can like, you know, just kind of fly from there, when really we're not talking that kind of experience. At least I don't think we are, you know, for this thing. So it's really, as you said, creating, understanding what's the best way to kind of nomenclature that's going to attract them. And they eat in cars, obviously they eat, like everybody relates to that, right? But it's like we have to then redefine what a car is, I guess, at this point, because people's minds do go to most often, you know, four wheels, highway, traffic, you know, doors open up, they become like Knight Rider or whatever with wings, and you can fly away now, kind of deal. And it's a different, it's a different world. But yes, it's interesting. I'm excited just when I think about the concept of humans being able to get to and fro faster, more efficiently. Just all this, you know, that comes along with it from the emergency standpoint. But then, like you said, the recreational standpoint. Like, I can't wait to buy tickets to one of these things, you know, to go see the pros, like, you know, Team A versus Team B, you know, flying these things around in some big open airfield stadium kind of concept. Like, yeah, sign me up all day.
Yeah, VIP passes from Jack all around,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Our crewmates here. So I just wanted to say,
your contact information in the chat.
yeah, exactly. We'll talk offline. You know,
Terms and conditions to apply. Yeah.
I wanted to give a shout out to NASA for at least trying, Jack, because they've been doing this, you know, they're calling it the national campaign, which is like very US focused, but still they've been holding these meetings all open to the public. I think hundreds of people are dialing in, but it's hundreds of science nerds that are into this, right? Like, so I agree with you. And this article, the hardest thing is kind of crossing that Rubicon to mainstream media. Okay. This has been our challenge because, you know, like the people watching us right now, I guarantee it, are people in the tech industry, people that are following all of us on LinkedIn, or, you know, are fans of Airspeeder, PromoDrone, whatever. It's, you know, I always say we're so good at FUBU, right? For us, by us, when it comes to marketing and media. I think the toughest thing is to get into broadcast media. Now, we saw 60 Minutes had Whisk on there, two months or 3 months ago, whenever that was. And, you know, everybody was all excited. It was kind of a one and done. I haven't seen anything further from it. That was great. The reason why I was at Archer is because I'm actually filming a PBS documentary on eVTOLs and drones, which I'm really excited about, because that will be, now that's PBS and it's going to be eventually naturally broadcast, but it's kind of getting onto Discovery Plus, you know, because when you think about, like, let's just talk about BattleBots, right? Like, so here's a bunch of folks that like create these robots and drones that like blow each other up in an arena, right? But once they got on Discovery Plus, then people started really watching them. Same Drone Racing League, another great example. You know, so I agree with you, Jack. I think the racing application is a great way to get people excited about it. You know, all these other applications, the passenger ones, like, how do you do that? You need the outlet. You know, you need the good news stories and people willing to tell them and listen to them. And I think that's been our biggest challenge. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed noise, right? Plenty of times. I think noise is a big thing. I think people implicitly understand that one. But outside of that, why is the public not inspired? I think you're right, Dawn. It's getting on the right channels and talking about it. And honestly, though, why hasn't the news covered it? It's because there haven't been a lot of things they could hold in their hand, right? If we think back to like Uber Elevate, that was as many people that I know in this industry that got excited and inspired and actually went on to do real things after that. There was a lot of BS at that conference, you know, a lot of nothingness. And, you know, sometimes it's worth it to inspire, you know, your core people. I think that conference definitely accomplished that goal. But we didn't come out of that era with something like awesome like this Jetson thing. We didn't come out with like kind of tied to something we already understand, like Formula One racing, with like what Airspeeder is doing. That's really where we got to be before we get the cameras turned on us. And then I liken it to like kind of like Ninja Warrior. You just brought up BattleBots. But Ninja
Yeah.
Warrior was just this offshoot. I think it might have been Spike TV or G4 TV. It was like one of the, kind of non-mainstream channels, right? Um, and just enough people started watching it and showing like, hey, grandma, grandpa, don't you think this is funny when these people fall? Or like, isn't this awesome to see it when somebody actually like makes it through this challenge course? And now American Ninja Warrior is a huge thing. Or even Most Extreme Elimination Challenge became Wipeout. Like you get enough eyeballs on it, it becomes mainstreamed, and then from there.
We're
And I think
getting there though.
yeah, we
We're
are. I
getting
think
there
the
as an
potential is
industry.
high.
And
Yeah.
we're slowly opening our doors a little bit. I think when we talk about noise, we both literally are trying to make these things as quiet as possible. And then just metaphorically as an industry, we're trying to be as quiet as we can about opening the doors to what we're achieving as an industry. Each of the eVTOL players, OEMs, really has a quite close grip on what they're releasing. And fair enough, they've got a lot of
Agree.
public shareholders out there, and that has to be a very manicured process. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, they are trying to serve the public, and we need to create the awareness out there for that public to come into that journey.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we're constantly here thinking, look, our service to this industry is to just get people excited, to get them to fall in love, and to access the technology in a number of different ways, whether it's augmented reality, that we're building augmented reality opportunities so you can be in a speeder, same with virtual reality as well, experience what it's like to be an airspeeder pilot. On all different devices, we've got simulators that we're releasing. There's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that just opens up the different windows for people to come into this industry. And the net result, is that people will be inspired, like us when we were at Uber Elevate, but also the next generation. Like let's get the next generation of engineers, of pilots, thinking about this, having experienced and touched through play. And when there's got a newborn, they do learn through play. So let's allow the industry to have something to play with. And
I can't let that slip. He just said he has a newborn, so congratulations, Jack. That's really exciting.
yeah, thank you guys. Explaining this.
You don't look tired enough. Are you
You
sure?
don't at all. That's so
Yeah, this
exciting.
is as
So-
good as I get.
This is a great conversation, and I want to add to that because every Sunday if I can, I park myself in front of the TV and I watch my Ravens game, right? The Baltimore Ravens, that's my team, right? So for the last few weeks, I didn't see it last weekend, but the previous two games, I'm watching the game, and they run all the commercials, right? And this is like prime time television, it's the NFL. And then a Honda commercial comes on. So it's interesting you're talking about racing, and they talk about the spirit of racing at Honda. And they start with,
Oh,
they
yeah, I
said
know
we
this
couldn't,
commercial.
and then we did it, right? So they go through this history, this timeline from racing to everyday vehicles to all these things they do. And they ended the commercial with an eVTOL flying through the city saying, like, what will we do next, right? And so this is Honda, who's paid for a primetime marketing during an NFL game to show the world, to start to prep the world for kind of this flight. And I think that's a genius way to do it. The OEMs themselves are starting to, take up these prime time spaces. It's not just us, like these kind of, they're the ones out there too, paying for these opportunities for the community. So it's going to take a collaborative, voice to get the community behind it. And I was so inspired when I saw that Honda commercial. I'm like, this is Honda. They're massive, right? And here they are, and playing the game we're playing, trying to figure it out. But it's a lot of credibility and validation when you see it during an NFL game, for
Yeah,
example.
and the first few segments of that commercial are not even overstated. Like they did do those things.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
look at the history of Honda and the person who built those bikes and how he basically just made a product so good that he made enough money to make the next product so good and built his way into the industry. He was not welcomed in. So that's a perfect example, I think, of passion driving um, the industry forward. But I also want to bring it back to something Jack said about access. Yeah, access is so important, and if for some reason in aerospace we do really want to keep it to ourselves. I think maybe it's because we have a lot of former military people and they're used to keeping quiet on things, right?
Hey,
Hey,
hey.
they have to. I mean, it's a discipline, right? It's a good discipline to have. But yeah, marketing is where we fail. So
Yeah.
we got to learn how to market the truth and bring it to people. And because when you see it, you get excited. What were you gonna say, Don?
I have just 1 second. I almost picked this article for today, which was about the alignment between eVTOL companies and classic car manufacturers. And Jamar just mentioned Honda, right? You've got Hyundai with Supernal. There was a whole bunch in this article. Now I wish I had picked it. Honestly, it would have been a great segue. But to your point, Jamar, if the car manufacturers now get into, to use Jack words, the flying car, that's going to be an easier mental leap for people, even if these things don't have wheels and drive on the road and then fly.
Yep.
They already are a mess. I think. Oh, sorry, Jamar, but I think they're starting to move quick. You look at companies like Toyota, who's no longer an automotive company; they're a mobility company, and they're now actively looking into the vertical space. They've already put $1 billion down into Joby, I believe. And
That's right.
there's a whole list of other automotive players. You've got Aston Martin that have announced their concept, Daimler have invested, Volkswagen have 3 flying car projects. You've got Hyundai, who've already said that they've put $1.6 billion down and will have flying taxis by 2030. That was the CEO that said that. But they are pushing massively into this space. But I'm not surprised they're moving in. They're using the same kind of technologies that are built into the ground-based vehicles and moving a lot of those powertrains into the aerospace sector. The question is, are they moving quicker than the traditional aerospace partners? Are they going to move in at the right time as well? Because we're starting to see a ramp up of those types of players. And how will that fare against the new OEMs that are trying to nudge into this space? So it's going to be competitive. But Mike, back to your point on that Honda ad, which I absolutely love. It starts with racing. Every single one of those verticals he talks about. Motorbike, just like the car, it starts with racing. Charles Rolls was a racer. Henry Ford was a racer. Marcel Renault was a racer. They were all racers. And the reason those brands are still here today is because they really pitched themselves at the edge of competition, drove and built a brand. And from that, not only had the space and place to be able to test the technologies at an early nascent stage, but then when the market was ready, pushed into new markets, such as sports cars, luxury cars, and then mainstream as well. So awesome. I can see the logic. I can see what they're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even when they weren't racers themselves, they knew that being in first place was a great advertisement for your engineering. Ferrari, and then later Lamborghini. Lamborghini, very much like Honda, made his way by starting with a part, making the best part, and when Ferrari didn't want to buy it, he built his own car around it. So
race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
There you go.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break just to thank our sponsors. We've got Airspace Link, which is our newest sponsor. We have Drone Rescue Systems. We got PromoDrone. You've been sponsoring us for a while. Thank you, Jamar. I think we're on week 12, so thank you so much for sponsoring the show and making it possible. And we also have A-King Gum. Again, thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to our audience. I see you out there today. If you want to pipe up and ask some questions, you are welcome to. But we're going to head on over to the next article, which is my pick. I've been on a string of following lawsuits lately. This one's been going on for a while. So essentially, Epic Games tried to get around the App Store by allowing you to download Fortnite, one of the world's most popular apps, through their website and not actually listing it on the App Store. The idea was that they would get around what the app developers, or many app developers, feel are high fees for being listed in the App Store, and essentially handing over a giant chunk of your profits to Apple if you are successful. So this already went through a lower court, and it was deemed in Apple's favor, but Epic is not taking the fight lying down and is taking it to a higher court. And unlike last week, where I kind of did have more of a side on the issue, this week I'm not sure. I think it is kind of debatable. I mean, it is Apple's ecosystem, although I do think their point that they argue is that we need to make sure that apps are only downloadable through the App Store for security reasons is kind of farcical. You bought their product. You own their product. If you want to destroy their product, why should they care about the security, right? So I'm not sure how much that argument really should weigh in on things, but they do have some other legitimate arguments, which is I mean, you're running on our software anyway, so you have to pay us. I don't know. Anybody have some thoughts on this? Anybody
Well,
taking a side or no?
I want to nerd out a little bit as the
Okay.
lawyer on this
I thought
show.
you would like this one. That's why I picked
Yeah.
it.
Well, okay. So let's back up for a second. This is a Sherman antitrust claim. Okay, so the Sherman Act basically prohibits, it outlaws, quote, every contract, combination, or conspiracy in restraint of trade, and any, quote, monopolization, attempted monopolization, or conspiracy or combination to monopolize. And so what Apple is saying, what Epic Games is saying that owns Fortnite, is that Apple has created some kind of restraint on trade or a monopoly by requiring them to use their app, and otherwise, they shut them out. The Supreme Court has interpreted that language as only unreasonable restraints on trade are violations. By the way, this is a civil case, okay? So there's money involved, but this also Sherman Act has criminal aspects to it. And the Department of Justice has been eyeing Apple for a Sherman Act criminal case. And so what's really interesting about this is neither Epic nor Apple were happy with the district court's ruling. Why was Apple not happy? Because the district court said that ordered that Apple should have to permit apps that provide links to alternative payments on their app store. So Apple's fighting, they both filed appeals to this thing. So the really interesting thing is so many, let's call it friends of the court or amicus briefs. So these are outside parties that have a position that want the court to read what they have to say and consider what they have to say. 35 U.S. state attorneys generals filed in support of Epic Games. 35. I mean, tech companies like Roblox, Microsoft, advocacy groups, Electronic Frontier Foundation, other companies like Tile and Match and Basecamp and lobbying groups have filed amicus curiae briefs pretty much in support of Epic. I mean, that's significant here. And in an unusual move, the court is allowing both the Department of Justice and the state of California to argue during this appeal, to have time to argue. So this can really be groundbreaking in terms of, kind of what violates the Sherman Act, and we'll see how this all plays out. But I'll stop talking about the legal stuff now, and there's all kinds of
quick question on legal stuff, and then we'll let our guests kind of go at the red meat here. So how is this? So I think the argument from a theoretical standpoint would be Apple's only restricting trade within their store. So like if we were to think about a physical store, it's like, hey, if your product is going to be listed here on the shelf, to be listed on the shelf in my store, which has lots of customers, I take 30% of the product. And if you don't like that, get out. Now, where it gets kind of wishy-washy is Epic even listing in their store, right? Just because there is an app store available on their phone, that doesn't make the difference. Is that how you're perceiving it too, or am I like kind of equating it to physical stuff too much?
So I don't think they're focused on the monopoly prong, although I will admit I did not listen to the arguments. They did occur last week and they're available on YouTube to go ahead and watch those on demand, which would be interesting. I just didn't have time. I think they're just basically saying this is an unreasonable restraint on trade. And I think that's just a broader standard. And clearly a heck of a lot of people, including 35 attorneys general, seem to be agreeing. So an unreasonable restraint on trade. So I guess just more to follow, but would love to hear, let's go with Jack first.
Yeah, well, look, I don't have too much to comment on this. I think to answer the analogy of the store comment, it's the same as though you also own 50% of those stores, that you have really no alternative to leave to another store, and you are kind of restricted to buying from that one. Otherwise, you can go to the remaining market, which is what Android and Open. So, yeah, I can see, I can really see it from Epic's perspective. And I'll be honest, they had me since the 1980 Fortnite promo that they did about a year ago, which was a bit of a play on the 1984 ad from Apple. And yeah, I think that one has stung poor old Steve Jobs in his grave. It's not that one would have hurt. So yeah, I kind of get it from both sides. But for me, if we're calling sides, I'm gonna say I'm Team Epic on this.
What do you think,
I would,
Jamar?
I would have to agree. There's been, I'm not in that field as much, but I know there's been rumblings about some of maybe Apple's fair policies and how, friendly they are to some of their business partners or whatever. I'm not in the game, so I don't know how credible those things are. But, I would think ultimately it comes down to how do you get this title, this software into the hands of as many gamers who want to experience it as possible, is with as easy as possible, right? And at the end, they both win. So Epic is the one that's really sourcing what makes Apple viable, right? Like it takes content to make your content platform viable, right? So I'm Team Epic because they're really creating the IP, that's worth the most, money right there. You're talking the games. I mean, Fortnite's just a gold mine, just on the forget the software purchases, because that's a free game actually, just the skins and things alone. Just it's incredible that model that they built in gaming period around these virtual assets that can bankroll an entire company, So I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of weight goes to Epic for being that kind of, you know, the creator. It comes down to me. I'm always going to side with the creator at the end of the day. So
Yeah, I think we're starting to see not just, I mean, most people side with the creator, or have, but historically, in most recent history with tech, uh, they've been able to get like wishy-washy about what these platforms are, what competition or monopoly means. People look back to Microsoft Windows when they put Internet Explorer and basically put Netscape out of business. Technically, Microsoft won that lawsuit, uh, meaning that they weren't using their power in one industry as a monopolizing force in another. And I honestly, I mean, I personally disagree with that at the time. Clearly, Netscape went out of business, so that was wrong. Um, but the argument is in tech, things move so fast, and there's the innovator's dilemma, but there's also the incumbent can just completely not be able to move fast enough. But that really, I mean, it doesn't really work anymore when you've had FANG companies that have sustained their level of power for so long. Um, and to what Jack was saying, like it's Apple owns 50% of the real market, not just 50% of people who have phones. 50% of the people who have phones that actually purchase apps from the store go through them. So you actually aren't in business if your app was entirely mobile. Um, and I think what we're seeing with the lawsuit I brought up last week is you're seeing some actual intelligent lawsuits that are in defense of creators. Uh, and I think there's like an understanding like, hey, creators are what make these ecosystem work. And in fact, it looks like 70% of Twitter's staff has been let go or quit at this point. And you know what? The app still runs. So what was it's really the creators that are keeping the platform interesting, and it's the reason you go there. If it was just 128 character tweets from 10 years ago, people would still show up because there'd be good creators sharing good information. So, um, here's one for the creators. That's where I guess I'm switching my position. I'm Team Epic now. I went from neutral to Epic.
it'll be
You
interesting to
convinced
see
me.
if this. It'll be interesting to see how this affects the Microsoft Bethesda deal, or what if this has any, you know, thing in that regard. I know that's
Or
a different
Adobe
topic,
Figma.
but
Did that go through? Did anybody know? Because that
which
that
one?
seems like that could. So Adobe's buying Figma, which could be construed as basically using their power in one industry to push out another industry. It depends if you think collaborative creative software is different than regular creative software. I think that would be the line is drawn. But I didn't think much of that one. But in retrospect, yeah, that could probably be an antitrust issue. Um, Depends on which way it went. I think it got authorized though. So, all right, we got one last article today. A little bit back to the world of mobility. This one's from Dawn. So, what you find in Future Ride here?
All right, very fun. Let them eat cake. Well, not really eat cake. We're gonna watch cake. Cake makes electric bikes, and Volta makes electric trucks, and they're both from Sweden. And they're both have the joint goal and same goal as for decarbonization and decongesting last mile deliveries. And so here you've got a partnership between Volta and their Zero, it's called Zero truck. It's the world's first purpose-built electric 16-ton vehicle. At least that's what they say, designed for urban logistics. It's got a purely electric range of about 150 to 200 kilometers. And so they've got a whole bunch of trucks out there, an order of 6,500 vehicles worth about 1.4 billion pounds. So European dollars there. Maybe Jack can help us with that. And then I didn't do the conversion. And then Cake has a couple different. Yeah, maybe.
It's almost
it's not pretty.
Okay.
It's not pretty.
Cake has a couple vehicles, the Kalk, K-A-L-K, a utility bike called the Osa, and an urban commuter called the Maka. And what they're going to do is basically they're going to use the Zero truck, which by the way looks really cool because like the driver's seat is like in the middle with this big window for like 220-degree safety vision, right? To be able to see 220-degree, but there's a human driving this thing. It's just purely electric truck. And the truck is going to be used as like the mini hub or the mini warehouse. It's a mobile warehouse. And then they're going to have these Cake e-motorcycles on there. So they're going to park the truck. The e-motorcycles are going to come out and they're going to do the last mile deliveries. Really interesting model because I've not heard of something like this before, using the electric bikes or electric motorcycles or whatever. You know, Mike, you know this, we had Workhorse on the Dawn of Drones. They have an electric truck with a drone that flies out of the top. Like I've heard of that model, you know, the truck with the drone extending last mile delivery. This is just a different take on it. You know, my question to everybody as I was reading this, because they're pitching big, like this whole, you know, relieving congestion, you know, traffic congestion concept. I'm like, don't these bikes have to drive on the road? Like, I don't know about Sweden or Europe, because this is, by the way, going to kick off in 2023 Q1 with the H&M group. They're a fashion and design family of brands, and they're going to be doing this in Paris. So I don't know what the regulations are in Paris, but in the US, like you have to be on the road with an electric bike. Even those electric scooters, like they don't want you on the sidewalk. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, no, it's still quite new. It's very new in Europe. I can speak to the UK at the moment, but electric scooters aren't legal here. They're still only in trial in certain areas and certain locations, and have to be from a community or co-sharing kind of model. So it's still new, but then you look at Paris, and the really as a city is kind of set up for this kind of level of mobility in terms of bike lanes and allowing for that to happen. Yeah, it's ready. In terms of electric bikes, I know that if you've got a pedal, then it counts as a bike, or a bicycle, not a road bike, and then you don't need to have a license. So it's a bit more open access. The thing I didn't get from this article though was who's operating this. I get that you've got a beautiful truck and you've got a beautiful product and you're being delivered on a beautiful bike, and Cake, I love Cake. But I don't know who's running this. Is it going to be an Uber? Is it going to be like a DoorDash? Yeah, it was something I didn't really figure out. Is that who are the riders? Who's picking this up? Is it that all the warehouse staff are now going to be in the city in that truck working in there? And then also my next question is, how impactful is it? Because at the moment you've got electric vehicles that are delivering the parcels already. So is it just this whole thing is about improved logistics time? Because it's a trade for trade on it being green anyway, right? Whether it's an electric truck or an electric truck plus bike, still the same. So is the article about improved logistics? I kind of missed that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jamar, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the concept's great, but I have a couple concerns. Like, you know, I live in San Diego, and for the first couple of years when we had the scooters here, like every corner was like cluttered with like just dumped scooters, you know. So it was like it created a whole other problem. It's like, yeah, you can, it's like, yeah, you can bar hop on the scooter now, but like when you're done, you're just going to toss it on the side of the road, and then there's 50 of them piled up, right? So that created an immediate problem, which did create some solutions. Now new businesses pop up that go around and collect them and all this kind of stuff, but. I mean, I think, what do you do with that technology when you have, you know, 4 million, 5 million of these things globally, 10 million, and then now it's time to upgrade? What do you do with all those things? Like, what happens? What landfill is going to hold all these things at the end of the day? So that's just when any of those kind of transportation at that level of scale, I just think kind of sustainability more so than anything with that. But that's just where my head goes to. You know, just how are you the infrastructure? How are you going to support that level of that many vehicles all over the place? When scooters are already piling up on corners, they figured it out. So I think it's like a real estate thing now. Only so many scooters per block, and they have lanes for them to park them in now. So where are these going to go? If the scooters are there, like where are these bikes going to go? Kind of deal.
Yeah, there's like zero urban planning for any of this.
Yeah, that's what
really.
I mean,
exactly. You know, like I was in Austin, Texas for Move America, that conference, and Austin actually is pretty much on top of this, but you know, they Cake just opened up an office in Venice Beach near LA as their North American headquarters. So maybe there's some of these things coming to you. You're not too far from there, Jamar. Yeah. I don't know. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think Jamar brings up a good point, and Chris Wedgeworth agrees. He says exactly and talks about battery waste. There's a little bit of like greenwashing that's I think people have finally gotten kind of wise to, right? Where it's like, oh, it's one thing to just say, hey, we use green technology. It reminds me of almost like when people said, we're going paperless, like as if we weren't.
And then they hand you a receipt.
Completely electronic devices that are now requiring to pull energy off a grid, which might mean in your area that we're burning more coal because you're not using paper. You know, like. There's a give and a take to it, and like you said, Don, I don't think, especially after coming back from Japan and seeing what public infrastructure that's planned does, and how well it works when it's planned, I think we've seen a lot of this, like, oh, we'll just put scooters out there and expect a single private company with a couple, at best, $100 million be able to completely solve the infrastructure within a city. I think there needs to be more planning than that. It'd be nice if H&M, you know, works together or creates some type of industry panel, or what would you call that? There's like names for it. When a whole bunch of players, yeah, like a coalition or something like that, to help move the infrastructure forward to support these things. If there truly is a case for it to be green, I think there might be actually. Just thinking about. It really does depend on the city, though, and what Jack was talking about. There's a lot of walkable spaces in Paris that if these were going at low miles per hour, they might be actually able to traverse them if they have the right type of computer vision, which would then actually serve that goal of alleviating traffic, right? Congestion, which then would lower emissions. They could make the case there. So I think it just has to be actually thought out and done with the city planners. And if not, it's kind of just marketing and only marketing. So
very, very Swedish marketing. It's three Swedish brands here disrupting an industry we don't even know needs to be disrupted. But
yeah, well, and I'm wondering how many people are ordering directly from H&M to have stuff delivered to their house, like, you know, and then like
fashion.
And fast fashion. And if you are like, you know, how big is that package, and you're putting that on a bike? You know, I don't know. You need multiple bikes for one delivery if someone's ordering a bunch of stuff. I don't know how this is going to work. But again, it's the first time I saw this kind of electric truck, electric bike combination, which is why it intrigued me.
I like the multimodal element, though. I think to Mike's point, though, we could probably go a step further. Something like if the Volta trucks batteries were being recycled to help fuel Cake's batteries, for example, and you can see this natural evolution of high density batteries going to smaller micromobility, and the same batteries
retain less power. Yeah,
exactly. And I would love to be able to kind of see that built into the story, but I haven't seen it here. to me, it sounds like it's a big win for H&M and a big win for Sweden, but not much else.
Yeah, I just want to leap on that point because I think it brings up an extra layer of understanding about battery technology. I think ultimately, like, because we were talking about battery waste, and that is a concern, right? We are increasing the amount of battery waste, but um, one of the things I'd like to compare it to is when, you know, more hippie-ish friends would talk about, like back in the days when we all sat around the campfire and like lived in harmony with nature. And I'd say, well, could you imagine everybody now burning fires every day? Like that would be basically London, Industrial Revolution. So that's actually you're emitting a lot of carbon to get that heat energy that way, and it's actually a lot more efficient the way that we run our electricity now. And I think battery technology at minimum allows us not to waste energy because alternating current as it travels is going to dissipate over time, right? That's why we have transformers to increase the speed and all this. um, so battery technology gives us the ability to store and not waste. So I think we should always, even as we think of the waste that batteries themselves create, compare that to that burning fire and or the coal engine train to think about how much more efficient this technology is in comparison to past technologies for utilizing energy.
Can't plug up a coal train and charge it up to get more coal, right? Don't think so, right? It's not how that works, right?
Definitely not. Any final comments, Don?
No, I think you guys all had really interesting comments for this one. On the only thing I'd say is on the battery recycling, I did meet I forget the name of the company. I got the guy's card somewhere. Going into that MOVE conference, he was like, yeah, we're like the world's largest battery recycler. And I was like, do y'all recycle drone batteries? And he was just like, huh. And then I'm like, where did the dead drone batteries go? And just as I've walked around that whole conference, which were a bunch of these electric bike people, electric truck people, and the ecosystem, the whole time I'm thinking, where are the drone people here? Because, where are the eVTOL companies? Where's Airspeeder? Because, this is all going to be multimodal. And just you've got these distinct groups even within aviation, right? We talk about the drone crowd, the eVTOL crowd, and they're just not necessarily talking to each other. And so planners aside, I mean, until we talk to each other, then we can grow to the planners as a group, and so I think that's one of the missing links too.
Yeah, you got to use the right tool for the job, right? So there's going to be points where using a drone is actually going to be more energy efficient. And as long as we have thoughtful people like Jack and Jamar here thinking through these things in the industry, I think we'll get there, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So great talk today, everybody. Want to thank our guests, Jack and Jamar, for joining us today. Want to thank the audience for joining us as always. You make this channel what it is. I want to thank our sponsors for supporting us. That includes Jamar. You've gotten this show off the ground, and you make it so Dawn and I get to do what we love every week. Thank you again. Dawn, we've got some great stuff coming up. You want to tell us what's coming up?
We do. So there's this group out there called the Unmanned Network, and Alon Ben Gal from Israel is going to be on the Dawn of Drones on Wednesday. You should check it out if you're in this ecosystem because it's free to join and it's really interesting what he's done. So that's Wednesday, and then really Thursday we're taking a break because here in the United States it's Thanksgiving, and so we are thankful for all of you, our fans and supporters, and we are going to take that day off, and we'll be back next week on the full crew. We've got was it Joshua or Morales, Starnav. We've got two really interesting guests. Jonty also. You're going to pull it up? Okay.
Yeah, Jonty Casca-Jackson and Joshua Morales. So.
Yeah, Jonty is an artist, but she also, by the way, is like an instructor at the United States Space Force Institute. So really interesting techie kind of artsy background. And then Josh from StarNav, who actually I saw at the MOVE conference and convinced him to be on this show. So that's next Monday. And then we'll see what we do. Tuesday. Tuesday, can I say the big demo world premiere?
No, I don't know. Can you?
All right.
Did you get
I'm pretty sure.
authorization?
Look, stay tuned. I'm pretty sure 3 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have a world premiere of speaking about Drone Deck and some of the things they're doing. So check that out next Tuesday. So that's all we've got.
All right. So we are out here.